Religious persecution turned redemption story, and it sounds like ancient history. But what happened to Paul in Acts 22 mirrors so many modern conflicts where former extremists become powerful voices for peace and understanding.
That's such an interesting parallel. The way Paul handles this hostile crowd in Jerusalem really shows the power of acknowledging your own past mistakes to connect with others.
You know what's fascinating about his approach? He immediately establishes credibility by speaking in Hebrew and mentioning his education under Gamaliel, who was essentially the equivalent of a Harvard law professor in ancient Jerusalem.
Well, that's what makes his strategy so brilliant. He's basically saying, I was the ultimate insider, before revealing how his whole worldview got turned upside down.
And let's talk about those credentials. He wasn't just any student. He was trained in what they called the strictness of our father's law. Historical records show Gamaliel's students were considered the elite of the elite in Jewish scholarship.
Hmm, that makes his transformation even more remarkable. He had everything to lose by converting to Christianity, didn't he?
Exactly. We're talking about someone who had a guaranteed position of power and influence. Historical sources suggest he was likely already a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court. That's like giving up a Supreme Court nomination today.
The way he describes his Damascus Road experience is so vivid, too. The bright light at noon, being struck blind. He's giving them concrete details that would be hard to dismiss.
Right. And notice how he frames it all in Jewish terms. He's not presenting Christianity as something that replaces Judaism, but as its fulfillment. He keeps emphasizing the God of our fathers and his continued devotion to Jewish traditions.
Well, that strategy seems to work until, boom, he mentions that one explosive word, Gentiles. The crowd's reaction tells us everything about the cultural divisions of that time.
You know what's incredible? Archaeological evidence from first century Jerusalem shows physical barriers in the temple that separated Jews from Gentiles, with inscriptions threatening death to any Gentile who crossed them. That's how deep this prejudice ran.
So when Paul suggests God's salvation is equally available to everyone, he's not just challenging their theology, he's threatening their whole social order.
Exactly, and then we get this fascinating twist with his Roman citizenship. Historical records show that less than 10% of the empire's population had citizenship rights. It was incredibly rare for a Jewish religious scholar to also be a Roman citizen.
The commander's reaction really highlights that. He paid a fortune for his citizenship, while Paul was born with it. That must have been quite a moment.
And here's what's particularly interesting about that. Records from that period show citizenship could cost up to 250,000 sesterces, equivalent to decades of an average worker's wages. When the commander says he paid a large sum, he's not kidding.
So Paul's unique background, educated Jew, Roman citizen, former persecutor, positioned him perfectly for his mission across different cultures.
Absolutely fascinating how it all comes together. Even his arrest becomes part of a larger plan. It gives him platforms to speak before governors and eventually reach Rome itself, which was the center of the known world at that time.
Looking at the broader historical impact, it's remarkable how this one incident became part of a narrative that would reshape Western civilization.
And that's really the powerful lesson here. How someone's greatest perceived failures or setbacks can become platforms for something much bigger. Paul probably didn't expect to end up in chains, but those very chains gave him access to audiences he never would have reached otherwise.